Actually, they show that.
I'm taking Michigan State students from.
This was,
It's work.
site plan review.
It's work. I'm working.
So this is a survey. But then
Flying into
the other
Rome,
thing-
in Rome for 6 days. I'm in Florence.
We were on the continent, I was to do something else. It's a big continent,
I know.
there's a lot there.
This is the first time that I'm going to the South. I have been all over Northern Europe. This is gonna be my first time in Southern Europe.
Is this for the spring break for everybody, or is this just a personal vacation?
Oh, no, I'm taking students abroad. I'm taking Michigan State students abroad.
I didn't realize abroad started so late.
COVID is what did this one. It used to be like,
January.
oh yeah, it used to be
I was
the
wondering,
entire semester. And then COVID. Yeah.
Well, it's a great bad call.
We're going to
No,
postpone
it's
start the
just-
meeting in a few minutes while we work on a quorum here
I
for
know.
voting
And they
purposes.
might-
On the island.
Hey, Mark, for a special land use,
Yeah.
is that you have to have 6
You have to have
people
6.
here, right? No,
6 voted.
6 voting, oh, no, that's what I mean,
Yeah.
6 voting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's,
We
I
don't
forgot.
have 5.
Right, yeah, you can, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
When do you leave?
I leave a week from Monday.
And you'll be gone till,
I'll be gone for 14 days.
so nice.
Yeah.
And they go off to Greece, and then how long are they there?
They're in Greece for an additional 3 weeks.
And then kind of do the islands and.
Oh, yeah. They are, they're island hopping.
So fun.
They're gonna have a blast. Yeah.
Sometimes youth is not wasted on the job.
Until the.
I know, right?
Sometimes it works.
So true.
I'm really happy for them.
I need to get a lot of people to
And they,
Oh my gosh, I don't just like somehow just culture and like different surroundings.
they gotta get out of it. They gotta get out of it. They gotta get out of it.
Just like all that, like I love it.
See your dad?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Right, pyramids and right, some of the, I've seen some of those, like, and I have just. So much that just. Greece has.
It's a committee, yeah, and
It'll be nice.
That's nice.
It's a nice weather.
Now, it's supposed to be sunny in 60s. Oh, yeah, I take that.
Not-
No,
Not here.
no, not here. Yeah, Rome's supposed to be sunny and in the 60s, upper 60s. Yeah.
Do you feel like 70s outside?
That I,
Yeah, so nice.
You can't run this.
We're waiting for Bob.
Well, they're trying to round up.
I think they're getting them. Because I think they're gonna push it.
I'm going to discuss it.
Bob will be here in 10 to 15 minutes, so we might, when we start.
We can just move that later on the agenda. if we need to.
Ready to start now?
That's okay.
Okay, I'd like to call the planning commission meeting to order. Are we recording?
Yes, we're on.
Okay. I'd like a roll call, please.
Rick Tarczynski,
Here.
Vanessa Warren,
Here.
Emily Dubay,
Here.
Bob Thomo will be here later. George Pete is absent. Bill Mulder is absent. Mark Boudet,
Here.
Barry Leskard,
Here.
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
We have 5, that is a quorum.
Okay.
6.
So we'd like to have an approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Last 2 meetings, right?
Yeah.
I move to approve February 16th meeting minutes.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Next up.
Give me that date.
Second.
Is it March 2nd?
March 2nd, and I do have
It's a
one,
special meeting. You have a,
That was a special.
yeah, and I do have one correction, on the heading of that, it does say February 2nd.
yes.
But those are the minutes for March
Okay.
2nd, so I apologize for that.
So I propose that we approve the minutes of March 2nd with the corrections brought forth by Jeff.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, next item. This is for public comment for anybody here for an issue or topic that we're not discussing on the agenda tonight. But first, the audience here. Any comments? Online? Anybody online have a comment regarding something not on our agenda tonight? Appears not to be. Okay, so we'll roll on to new and old business. We're going to hold off on the public hearing for the special land use until Bob is here. So we can go to the short term, which would be better, short-term rental discussion or the
Let's do the
the
rerun.
reroute. The reroute might be shorter.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to discuss topic D, discussion of possible reroute of M119 to Lake Road. And Victor, would you like to start us off on this?
Yes, I will. Let me get the,
No, we're a little out of order there, so don't rush.
sorry. So as many of you probably know, the state had requested the city's opinion on rerouting M119 from Main Street to Lake Street. And essentially that would mean exchanging jurisdiction, from my understanding. They asked for council's opinion. I went to council said, yes, let's get the community's opinion, and the DDA and the planning commission as the planning commission also, this could affect, planning. So well, I guess what we're here today to talk about is not everything that encompasses the reroute, it's how it would affect planning from a planning perspective. And I briefly looked through the master plan, and I just have it up here on the screen, potential proposed route of, yellow is existing M119 route, red would theoretically be the new route. So it would also go into the township county as well. But anyway, so our goal is to look at how it would affect planning. And when we think about planning, I've looked at the master plan, we have goals on transportation, on streetscaping, on bluff preservation, as well as safe routes to school. We also have talk about, supporting businesses downtown. So from the planning commission's perspective, how would potentially just exchanging jurisdiction, if at all, affect those things? Like one example I can think of is, bluff stability, right? Less traffic, theoretically, less traffic on that road would mean fewer instability issues, potentially. So would rerouting it really cause there to be less traffic on that or not? And does that outweigh other things like, safe routes to school, or, because potentially the speed limit on Lake Street could increase if MDOT comes to a determination, a study there. Would that affect the routes to school and safe routes to school? So things like that. So I'm not here to give you all the reasons why not. I think it's for you guys to discuss, but I think we should be looking at it from a planning perspective, and how does it jive with our master plan and how it affect planning in those regards.
And so we've been working towards creating some kind of recommendation tonight for the city council.
Yeah, some kind of recommendation or or even some sort of, I don't think there needs to be a vote, but some sort of ideas and reasons for or not for doing it
Like
based
whether-
on planning.
Right.
For example, we have, goals, and, we can talk about, the downtown development goals, economic development goals, transportation goals. Yeah, so like, for example, goal F is transportation safety and pedestrian amenities. Goal 11C says, investigate the current sidewalk system to assure school-aged children have a safe and complete sidewalk system to travel to school and back home. Also investigate the safe route to school program for potential fines. So, that's something we want, is would this impact that or not? or do we know?
Understood. And have you also looked at the future land use map?
Yeah, and I have that on the screen, and that's another thing also to consider is, here's a future land use map, and you see both Lake Street and both Main Street, even though they're different lengths, have a mixed use of commercial, residential, and public space. So, some say, Lake Street is a residential school, as a residential district, there is residential districts on Lake Street, but there's also office space and commercial.
Yeah.
And there's public, which are the schools. Same thing with Main Street, you have public residential as you get to downtown, commercial, and as you leave, it becomes residential again. So, how would exchanging jurisdiction impact those land use patterns? Or would they?
Right.
That's another question.
Okay, I think first, would you guys like to hear from the public on this first or start discussing it public first?
Yeah.
Anyone in the audience like to comment on the rerouting of M119? Yes, sir.
Fred Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street. This is just my opinion on it. I don't think hardly anybody will go up there, even when they know that that's the route. I can't imagine people coming into this area, which is, as soon as you pass the state police post, is out of your way to go north unless you're gonna do Harbor Springs and or the tunnel and trees across the village. You're gonna come through Harbor Springs no matter what the signs say, I think.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's gonna change anything for that.
Okay.
Now that, by that, I do not mean that I think it doesn't matter whether the route changes. I think it's preferable to keep it the way it is. Biggest reason for the school, the kids on that route.
Because I think one issue would be that if it did change, it would affect, I think there'd be a higher speed limit probably.
But we don't know. They could change the speed limit.
They can do anything.
Does it not have to be a minimum of 30 miles per hour?
It's all based on their guides and their study.
MDOT will do whatever MDOT wants to do. It will be completely out of our control. So how those intersections are designed, how they're built. And I think studies show that in the beginning, people will have their old habits, but in time, people will start following the old route, the new MDOT route. And it is going to decrease traffic downtown. They will start going up White and they will start heading down Lake Street.
Online, is there anyone online who'd like to make a comment?
Please raise your hand if you'd like to.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
If you have somebody there.
I don't see anyone, go ahead.
Mark Rondell, from across the street here. I guess I'd like to just reiterate something I said last week in the public hearing that was held. And that is that I think it would be very, very helpful for the city and MDOT if we had comprehensive and good traffic studies, traffic flow studies of where the traffic around this area is actually going and what they're doing. Because I think that it's easy to think of visitors to Harbor Springs, and this is our main traffic flow. But I think in reality, there's a lot of traffic that comes through town, but not to town. That there has been for the last 30 or 40 years, tremendous growth and development in the townships to the north of us and along the shore and so on. And very, very little growth in town, actually, for the last 40 or 50 years. Yeah, we have larger homes now, but we don't really have that many more homes. And certainly we don't really have that many more new businesses in town. So I really think that the growth in this region has occurred outside of the city And that there's an awful lot of traffic that goes through town rather than to town. And I think that's already evident by the number of cars that already do turn at the Lake Street corner up there. When I'm coming to my house down below the bluffs here, almost all the time, the vast bulk of the traffic already turns and goes up Lake Street. And very few cars in the summer, sure, more, but very few cars come on down the hill into town relative to the number that go north. And a few years ago, I had opportunity to work at a friend's shop north of town regularly during the winter. And I was flabbergasted at the amount of traffic that goes across Quick Road. That traffic, detours north of town already, and then turns north at State and goes on up toward Cross Village or the townships up to the north. And so there is a tremendous amount of traffic in this area that isn't really coming to Harbor Springs, but that may have to go through there because that's where the state highway goes anyway. So I think that this ought to be a concern. And, obviously moving from Main Street or through town, the route to Lake Street is fraught with all kinds of difficulties. Like you mentioned, safe routes to schools, pedestrian transit, and so on and so forth. That are going to have to be dealt with if the highway goes there. I think that this is an opportunity from MDOT to really say, wait a minute, maybe we should look at getting the highway completely out of town. And then we can be the masters of our own transportation network in Harbor Springs. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
if we ask for a transportation study, there's transportation engineers that look at all the pros and cons that can lay out, okay, now you own Main Street, you can do whatever you want for a streetscape. What are the economic benefits of that? Now you do not have control over the speed limit that goes in front of the school. What are the pros and cons of that? So there are a lot of great transportation engineers out there that can do those studies that can really get some insight into whether or not this is going to be a good move for us.
Well, at the very least, they would say, let's do studies and see where the traffic is now.
Mark,
Yeah.
And how it
in this,
varies.
Mark, in this locale, acquisition and construction costs about 2.8 million a mile. Okay, you can do the math, what you're talking about. Probably not in my lifetime. Where's it gonna come from?
Well, was this one of the options that we could request additional studies, or is that on the table already with MDOT, that these studies would be done if we were interested, but we perhaps
Yeah,
not
so that-
committed?
That was something that they communicated with, to me in email afterwards, was that, because they read the Harbor Light articles on this and said they would have to, if the city was interested, perform many studies, basically. It would be a long process if the city was interested. I don't know if the city's not interested, how they would proceed, but yes.
They should have the studies done.
Yeah. Now, one of the.
Carol's got a question.
What I meant by that is if they're actually gonna proceed forward at all, if the city says we're not interested, if they're actually gonna, if they're just gonna, let it lie and not pursue it any further.
Would part of their studies perhaps also include just what the possible cost would be for the city in the future along the bluff where it's failing?
I'm not sure.
It's something that would be one of my concerns. And again, this isn't from a planning perspective that we're supposed to be talking about, but just generally looking at it as residents. What does it do for us? But go ahead, please.
Carol Winter, 141 Snyder Street. My comment was going to be about the bluff because my guess is that MDOT has asked about this because they're trying to extricate themselves from the
Absolutely.
potential expenses of continuing to fix the bluff.
Correct.
Because that's what they're working on right now, and then all of a sudden this came up, and I think it could just be catastrophic costs for the city if the city allowed them to switch jurisdictions on that.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I think there's a couple things, of course. There's a question of how much choice are we really going to have as a city, because it's a state highway and the state has more say than the city does. So I think we should be in conversation with them. Let's put that. I don't see this as the only option. Maybe they do, maybe the state sees this as the only option. It's A or B and that's it. And if you don't talk about it, we'll do what we want. I'm hoping that isn't the case. I'm hoping they'll be open to some discussion, maybe even to the point that, well, okay, we're okay with this, but you need to help us pay for some of these future repairs. You know, because we know that's why you're asking this, and they were pretty straightforward, I think, about that, at least that's what we think. So I think we definitely need to engage with them, whatever that means. From a planning perspective, it would give us more say over how we dealt with Main Street in terms of speed limits, streetscape, I'm a hard time with that word, bike paths, those kind of things, closing it to have a festival, saying we don't want cars in town in the summer, you all gotta park down here, we're gonna run a trolley and take you down Main Street. We can't do any of those kind of things now, so when it's the state highway, our hands are tied. So I think there's merit to having that happen, but I don't think this is the option that's good, to take it to Lake Street. And I think we'd have to have major financial discussions with them about what this means to the city and how, can you help us?
No, MDOT will not help. They won't. And I think that if the city says they're not interested, MDOT's not gonna force their hand on it either. I've never seen them force their hand when they've come to communities that have asked for a route to be moved or for things to be changed. They throw it out there. They see if the community is interested in it. But I think if we say no, they're not gonna force it down our throats. They've never done that before, so I would be shocked if they did it. But I can tell you MDOT does not have the money. When they wanna wash their hands of this, they wanna wash their hands of it. They won't help with future.
I still think it's worth, I'm not arguing with you at all, but I think it's worth having a discussion. I don't wanna, as a council member here, to just say, no, we're not gonna talk about it. I don't ever think that's a wise thing to do with people. So I don't know what they would say, but we won't know unless we talk to them.
Exactly.
That's my.
Put it on the list
Yeah.
of maybe a pro or a con.
Yeah.
Barry, any ideas?
I mean, it'd be interesting to get what are the pros and cons just for the city as far as getting kind of a detailed list of benefits that come across from the city. Also, traffic wise, so right now, if you're going south on State Street, when school gets out, right now it's already a mess. So unless they plan on putting a light there, which I don't know if that's in the books for that, but it's impossible kind of to navigate through that, to go from, like, let's say the middle school to the high school. It's a good 5-10 minutes that you're sitting there. So it's already a mess now, you know, increased traffic will definitely increase that.
If it went through there.
Yeah. So.
Do you have any comments on this?
At the last meeting, I mentioned most of my concerns about the location of all our schools on that road and the traffic that that's going to bring into. Personally, I'd like it because that would put the traffic up closer to the gas stations and they wouldn't be going by my house all the time to buy gas, making a lot of noise. But I think for the city, it's really not a good deal. I think it would basically lead to a lot of rezoning of Lake Street to turn it into more of a commercial route and seeing more restaurants and convenience shops being opened there and kind of ruining that whole neighborhood area. So I think we're best to leave it where it is.
There's a lot of things along Lake Street now, with the exception of the ROS and stuff, is not single family
Yeah.
right now. And we're fighting to keep single family. Anything else?
No, I just think it's a disaster.
Okay. Straight
Well,
talk.
Bob made a good point earlier about the cost of, I get what you're saying, the cost of infrastructure improvements, and when we were discussing with staff and Main Street, so this is part of the plan, right? One plan, when we approve the capital improvements plan, we're looking at projects and how much it costs. Main Street actually has two services, so there's asphalt on top of concrete. Well, so there's double the road you have to dig up when you do a project. It also has much older infrastructure. It has like 80-year-old sanitary, which is what we would still maintain water and sewer wherever it's Lake Street or Main Street, whoever has the jurisdiction. But the drain, the sanitary sewer is, the storm drain. The storm sewer is what we would take responsibility over, and that's much older. On Main Street, it's about 80 years old versus on Lake Street, it's about 35 years old. So we're taking over aging infrastructure. So that's something to keep in mind, is the added cost of infrastructure. So yeah, just want to throw out there to add to what Bob was getting at with the costs of per mile. Thanks.
Emily, did you have anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to add that I would think it's important to stick with the facts and to have education on a situation before jumping to assumptions or opinions about things. And so I do like the idea of, if the state or whomever can do studies as opposed to just, you can't, I don't feel like you can assume like everybody that's coming down the hill or going up lake, they're just cutting and they're not going unless you stop everybody. I don't know who does that for the state, perhaps. But just getting as much information that's factual from them to move forward, I think is the most important. But I think it's important to hear from the citizens. Yes, I live on Main, absolutely. I would love it if less traffic was coming down Main, but I see all the other points. That's just my opinion, that, cars aren't going by at 40 or 35, not that I want it for the Lake Street people, but yeah, just any facts that we can make decisions on, I think are the best.
Okay. So it speaks towards Vanessa.
John,
John?
Yeah, John, if you have any thoughts.
Well, MDOT doesn't propose a relocation of a state highway link unless there's some underlying motivation on their end. And it could be they want to reduce congestion in the downtown. They may want to increase efficiency of traffic flow through the community, which has safety issues. The other part of it is that I think people tend to underestimate the impact that a state route has on the business community. People that are not familiar with Harbor Springs, that are relying on the state map to get around and relying on their GIS or GPS units. If the route takes them away from the community, some people may never experience the downtown. And in other state highway relocations, and one that comes to mind was about 20 or 30 years ago down in Romeo in Oakland County, where they put a bypass around the downtown. Downtown lost about 40% of its businesses. And MDOT doesn't really, hate to say it, but they really don't care about that. The other part of it is, when they decommission a state route, the community should and can ask them to return that route basically in a Class A condition. Okay, so they just don't move the route away and say, oh, here, community, Main Street is now yours. The community has the right to say, if you're moving the route, well, then you've got to bring that route up to a better condition, because over that period of time that you were using Main Street, the state route degraded and accelerated the decline in the infrastructure. So that's a negotiated item. The other part of it is if it was to run down Lake Street to get what Vanessa was doing, other communities have negotiated with MDOT on what the parameters are going to be relative to the future, because MDOT has a culture of solving congestion or capacity by increasing the number of lanes. Lake Street probably has a better chance of widening than Main Street does. So you want to protect yourself relative to, if they put it on Lake Street, of having a written agreement with them on what they can and cannot do, because they could increase speed limit. They could want to put a third lane. They may want to take off pedestrian access. MDOT's not real big on pedestrian crossings. So it could have a certain, it could have a certain impact on the quality of the neighborhood. So, but I'm trying to figure out why they're doing it.
John, I can speak to that a little bit. Just outside of, well, in town, but just west of State Street, there was a washout on the bluff, and M119 failed part of the road, and it washed out and caused damage to properties below. So they have to repair that road, and in that conversation of updating us on that, of that repair progress, they brought up this discussion of rerouting. So we assume that their intention is they want to kind of wash their hands off some of the risk, financial risk and liability of future bluff washouts.
Well, and, you know,
They didn't directly say that, though.
Yeah, you know, was it about 5 years ago, they had to redo the bluff stabilization in Petoskey, and it was 31,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and that's just, you know, that's so big, if that's their motivation, then, you know, if that's their motivation, then the negotiation would be, before you move the 119 designation, you gotta fix the bluff. You know what I mean?
So what we're also saying is, we need more information, but we want to proceed very cautiously.
Yeah.
And in an appropriate manner.
Correct.
With ideas of what we would feel we need to, you know, ask for.
Well, at this point, though, we really don't know what we don't know.
Right.
To some degree.
And that's why you kind of need that study, but, and John and I, we may be, you know, just, I don't know.
We may be prejudiced because
We may be prejudiced
for so
because
long.
because we've dealt with them so long and we know how they work and we have seen what they have done to communities. I have seen them put in one-way, you know, highways that have just absolutely desolated communities. They don't care. I have seen communities beg for the speed limit to be lowered. MDOT says we'll do a study. The next thing they know, it actually got raised, not lowered. You just lose all control and exact opposite things can happen. But if you get that traffic engineering study done that looks at the economic development, that looks at schools, that looks at safety, that encompasses, you know, something more than just traffic counts, then you can have a bigger picture on what this will do to the community.
And how would you make those studies happen?
Well, I mean, and MDOT, if they said that they were willing to look through into that, so MDOT, they typically don't do that themselves. They would actually go out to bid for an engineering consulting firm, and then they would bid on it and they would perform those studies.
Between the two of
I
you,
would consider having a study made by this city at the same time.
That would probably be the
And
best.
pay for it, so that when everybody's done, you can lay it on the table and see what the discrepancies are or aren't.
Because you never know, MDOT may say that they'll do that in-house as opposed to having a third party that, you know, doesn't have any interest in it at all.
do the two of you feel like you have enough knowledge that you could help with if we do go down the path of engineering studies to supply a scope of work
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
for these guys? So we're sort of like setting up the rules ourselves to a degree, so that we get the information that we need and not just a whole bunch of stuff that is meaningless to us.
Yes.
Okay.
Kyle wants.
Just, and I echo Fowler, as M100 goes through Fowler, which is the county I used to work and do Maple Rapids, and they came in and they did this speed study, and a 25 went to a 35, and it was very similar to Lake Street. And some of the areas like a 40, I just see them raising west of the IGA to 45 spots. Just, I've seen it happen.
Yeah, they use what they call the 85 percentile study. Now, we all know, okay, and I'll admit, we all tend to go 5 miles or 6, 7 miles over the speed limit, right?
We don't, Kyle, we
Okay.
don't. We just know that the other 85% out
Let me look
there.
outside. I drive the, looks like a gray Ford pickup.
Wait.
But anyway, what happens with the 85%? percentile study is, they'll have an unmarked car with a radar over a period of time. And if it's posted for 25, the 85 percentile may say that the speed is 33. So what they do is they come back and say, okay, now we're gonna raise it to 35. And then once it's at 35, 5 years from now, they'll go back, they could go back and do it again. And now the speed limit's 38, and they go, now we're gonna raise it to 45. And that, Vanessa and I have seen that over and over and over again.
And I hate to be the source of the problem here, but that all originated in Fowler because this 85 percentile, dead serious, because one of our deputies wrote Lieutenant Johnson from MSP's wife a ticket in the 25 zone, and that's where this whole 85 percentile started. So that's why we have firsthand knowledge. They came into Fowler, and that's where they had their study, but actually, on the flip side of that, they're now rescinding some of that 85 percentile study. They realize that because exactly what he's, if you ever drove through the speed trap in St. John's at 55, where our Uncle John's is, they raised that to 65. Our argument was the same thing. If you come back in 10 years, it's gonna, the average speed, 85 percentile is gonna be 68 or 70.
Yeah.
And when you stop it at 100, that was argument to them. Now they've seen the repercussions of that, so they are backing off some of these speed studies, but
I think, I'll just add something to what John had mentioned about the study in Romeo, for example, what an interstate route interstate can do to community. I think if we go down that route of wanting to look at studies, you probably should look at comparably situated communities to Harbor Springs. I grew up near Romeo. Romeo is not necessarily a destination town. It's not like Harbor Springs is, you're not on the route to somewhere and you stop the highway and you're like, oh, Harbor Springs, let me stop there. It's a little different. So I think we would want to try to find communities who are similarly situated to Harbor Springs. They're not necessarily just drive through communities.
But that's what a transportation engineer
Yeah,
study.
right. Yeah, that's what I'm just to emphasize that.
Well, I guess the general question from a planning perspective, is this something would you even want to have happen and go down the road of having the studies done? Or just say, no, it's not gonna work for us, and that's a recommendation to city council? Or do we say we should go down the road cautiously, but with a well-defined scope of work for traffic studies?
It just seems like there's few benefits to move it. So, I mean, but I don't know where everybody else's heads at.
I just think that's like the dividing point, making a decision, which way to go. It's pretty fundamental.
You could say no for me tonight.
Discussions on that?
So two choices, either say just to recommend the council no, or hesitant, but let's see some studies, kind of. We want to see
Yeah, we
some
want to-
facts and studies.
Create that work to do that and see if maybe there's a benefit, and maybe it's not on Lake Street, maybe it's somewhere else. But looking at what does that do to downtown, instinct says it's not good, but.
Yeah,
But I don't know that.
history shows it's not good.
Yeah.
Records show it's not good.
Yes, right, not good.
It's not good. It hasn't been good
I
yet.
think we have to compare apples to apples, like Victor was saying. Harvard, it's not as unique as some of us always say, but it's a very different town than a lot of the towns where highways just go through them. I do believe a lot of people that are in downtown Harbor are heading for Harbor Springs. And even if the highway changes at Pleasant View or Park Street or wherever, they're still gonna come to Harbor Springs because that's where they're trying to get. So I think if we we have to compare them to a similar town. I personally don't think Harbor Springs downtown would die if the highway didn't go through it. I just don't think it would. Because if you Google how to get like Tunnel of Trees, sometimes it doesn't take you through Harbor. It turns you off on Pleasant View and heads you up north anyway, sometimes. So I just don't think it would kill downtown. I don't. I think people come to Harbor to come to Harbor.
Well, I don't think, Nancy, it would have the same impact that maybe it had in Romeo when they bypassed it. But you have to, it will have, there should be conversation with the downtown business owners. Because removing non-local traffic off of a trunk line basically removes the opportunity for somebody to see their business. It's just one less set of eyes on the downtown or on the business, and it could have some type of a negative impact. Not saying it could 30 or 40% of the business loss, but it could have an impact. It's the same thing what we found when they convert one-way streets to two-way streets. They find that the business revenue goes up because you have traffic now in both directions rather than in one. So the same thing happens when you remove it, you're gonna see some sort of an impact. The other part of it is when you relocate a trunk line like that, like 119, it does have land use implications over a period of time. It changes the character of the neighborhood.
That's my objection, Nancy.
What's that?
I don't care about downtown impact. I care about the people who live on Lake Street.
Well, I don't think Lake Street's a good option. I mean, I don't think that's a good option. That's,
Over time,
yeah, I don't.
a
think
state
that's-
road on Lake Street will
Yeah, I don't
destroy that neighborhood.
I don't think that's a good option.
Yeah.
I'm not a
That's why
proponent of
no.
that at all.
There is no other alternate.
So if there's no
So it's
other
yes or no.
alternate to that, yeah, I don't know. I think we have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
About it. I mean, I think that's.
Just, but it's now, I guess my concern is that right now we have so much going on. It's now the time to, open up another line of action. It requires a lot of time because it will require time from staff.
But this is when we have the opportunity. This is when they came and asked us.
I would say, I would recommend, Victor's the one that's gonna have to call the shots with MDOT, but if they're the ones asking the community to relocate, then I would ask them, we need you to fund a traffic study, and we are going to help you put the scope of work together for the traffic study. Because part of it is, it's origin and destination based, okay? People are coming into town. You have to determine, are they coming into town and staying in town, or are they going through town? And so that's what the traffic study would look at. If a majority of the traffic coming in is really trying to go around, like you were indicating, then there may be other options besides Lake, maybe finding a route that goes up one of the other county roads and then cuts over and connects with 119, maybe 5 miles north of town. So it really depends on where the destinations are. So that's why, like Vanessa said, it takes a traffic study, and you have to take a look at multiple routes to find out what the characteristics are, to figure out where you really need to go.
Okay. Anybody want to make
What would
that
happen if
motion?
you said to MDOT, we want you to do a study, yada, yada, without the study right now? We're not really thrilled about this.
That could be a response for council, yeah, that.
I mean, to force their hand so they know that.
Or
Yeah.
to say hesitant, but would like the study.
Yeah.
But what
To
do we
help.
have input into the study?
I mean, because it would be great to have control over Main Street. There's no doubt about it. It would be great.
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, I have to make a motion?
Somebody's making a motion.
You want a motion?
And Victor-
Yeah.
Victor-
Well, this is where
you
you
might
motion.
tell them that Lake Street is not an acceptable option.
Well, there's a plenty of opportunities to how we can word this, right? And one of them is, we're not inclined to go on to Lake Street. We're not inclined to assume the financial liability for the bluff stability or any washouts there. But we are open to doing a study and looking at, potential other routes outside of town and working on an agreement, as long as those two conditions are met, right? That we don't want to go on Lake Street and.
Right.
So we could rephrase, the council can rephrase their response however they want. It doesn't have, it can be just a no and hands off. It could be, no, but, or no, and, or whatever. So I think, yeah, it's up to council how we respond. I don't think there's a.
Yeah, so we're just making a recommendation.
Quick,
Right.
They don't make
less
the
impactful
decision.
because of
Right.
less density of houses and things like that. And
That's-
better traffic.
From a planning perspective, you should make a recommendation to city council so they understand what we said here tonight, and so that they have that information.
Okay, so I move that we make a recommendation to council that we are not in favor of the Lake Street route, that we are not in favor of taking on more economic responsibility in stabilizing the bluff should it become ours. But we would like with intrepidation to move forward and look at a traffic study that looks at economic and cultural consequences as well as traffic.
May I make a suggestion?
Second.
Can I make a suggestion to your motion?
Yeah.
To
Okay.
make it more, let's think about it from MDOT's perspective, or if they look at this. I would think a suggested motion would be that, based on MDOT's option to relocate 119 through the community, the recommendation would be that before a decision is made, that the planning commission would request the city council to inform MDOT that a study needs to be made on the overall network to determine what a preferred route should look like, or route should be, without getting into all of the whys. We know why they want to do it. But
Right.
let's put it into a context that, we understand you want to relocate it, but we want a study that looks at preferred options before we make a final decision.
Right. And we would like that study to look at more than just
Lake Street.
and how to move cars from one place to
Well,
another. We want to look at the economic and the cultural
Well,
impacts.
We don't have to have that in the motion because we can
Right.
put that in.
We can put that in
in
the
proposed
scope.
Scope of work.
But the motion should include that requirement that we had, that you guys handle the scope of work.
Yes, I guess I'm trying to craft the motion for you in a way. That,
I'm trying to let you do it.
the motion would be that we recognize MDOT's request to relocate 119. However, we feel that a traffic study is warranted to take a look at preferred routes with input from the city on that scope of work. Period. And that would be it. And then Vanessa and I will throw all the planning stuff in it, so they have to do the economic assessment and all the neighborhood impacts and all that other stuff.
But you can't make the motion.
I can't make the
So
motion.
Is
you
that
want to
still your
revise your
motion?
motion
So
to
do you want
that?
to
Yeah.
change your motion? to-
Yeah. And no one seconded it, so that was easy.
Yeah.
Do I have to repeat it?
No, I think we can. If you're comfortable with that.
I'm comfortable with how we work.
And second,
Second.
do you want a roll call vote or just a yay or nay?
We can do, yeah,
Roll call.
okay.
Yay or nay? You can do that. All in favor, say yay.
Yay.
Yay. All not in favor, say nay. No nays. Thank you, John. Thank you.
That
Good
was
comments.
item D, so that can.
So that was your short one.
Yikes. Okay, so we're going to jump up to item A, which is a public hearing for special land use guest quarters at 588 East Main Street. Can I have a motion?
Myself and recuse myself.
Yeah.
And just let me know when you're done.
We will.
Okay, I move that we open up the public hearing for the special land use.
Second.
I just also want to bring up that I do have, my wife is, Mark and Nancy are, they're, her aunt, so I'm not directly related and I have no financial gain, but I just want to bring it out to the public that
Okay.
if you think that I should recuse myself, but I don't think that there's really a conflict there, but.
What was it, Barry? You're
So my wife
related?
Is the niece of, Mark
Oh,
and Nancy
okay.
that we're proposing for this.
But the key requirement here is there's no
Financial
financial
gain.
direct gain.
Yeah.
And so should we do a vote on this or just say it's okay?
I think we don't need to have a vote on this. If he was asking to recuse himself, I think then you would want to vote on that.
Yeah.
You're not asking to recuse yourself, right?
I'm not, but if you
There's
guys
someone
think
that's
that I
uncomfortable.
should, I definitely understand.
If you want to have a discussion, if someone wants a discussion of that.
Anybody have a concern about that? I don't either.
I don't.
Okay.
We had a motion by Vanessa. There was a second, but I didn't hear who. Bob, for the
Opening,
opening of SLU.
yes. Okay,
All in
So-
favor?
all in favor?
I,
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, so I'm gonna ask Jeff to give the background on this first, and then we'll start the discussion.
Yeah, so Mark and Nancy Rondell have submitted an application for special land use for a detached accessory building to be located in their rear yard. And I just want to point out, Victor, if you can pull up just one of the site plans for the property. I just want to point out that prior to coming to the planning commission, they did also go to the zoning board of appeals. There were some aspects of their project that didn't quite meet with the zoning regulations. They requested a variance, and that variance was approved. Mainly, the request was due to the age of the existing principal building and the size of that. They wanted to be able to build a larger footprint for their accessory building. Normally, the rule is that they cannot exceed 75% of the square footage of the principal building, which would have been a substantially smaller accessory. So, and the zoning board of appeals did grant that variance, and that's why we see a larger building here, but they have approval from the ZBA for that.
Jeff, I voted on this at ZBA.
we're not gonna have votes.
Yes, you can't vote
You
twice,
can't
right?
vote twice.
Oh,
Sorry.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Mark, you have the option. So special land use approval requires 2/3 majority of the full board, which is 6 yes votes. And you have 5 members that are able to vote on this. So you have the ability, if you would like, to request that this be tabled for the next meeting.
I would so request.
All right.
this is the shortest one.
That shocks me.
It's unfortunate. We
Sorry.
do have,
Missed that.
I did miss that.
I didn't realize that that we had that issue. So
Let me double check the bylaws. to make sure it's-
But we've done that before with him.
yes,
So-
that's a, yeah.
I
And
remember
it's-
there was another one.
Same.
It's
yeah.
complicated because we have 2 members that aren't present
Correct.
here that are
Correct.
adding 2, and with one, yeah.
But he's always, stepped out. He's never voted on these before.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's something that's in our bylaws or something that's directly in the Planning Enabling Act or Zoning Enabling Act.
It-
John, are you from? It's in one or the other.
Yeah,
It's in every
Yeah.
township or whatever board, I've lived, we've always had to do that.
So it says right here, a member who is also a member, so a planning commission member who is also a member of the city council or the ZBA shall not participate in a public hearing or vote upon the same matter that the member voted on as a member of the ZBA. Provided the member may consider and vote on other unrelated matters involving the same property. So is this the
Can't
same
vote
related
twice.
matter?
I think it's gotta be because it's the same site plan that's being requested. They were looking at it at the zoning board of appeals for a variance to build the building. And now we're looking at a special land use request to build the same building. Is that the same matter?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because another perspective would be the same matter would be an applicant comes to the planning commission for a site plan for special land use. And that gets appealed to the ZBA, then that same member couldn't hear that at the ZBA.
that's correct. You have to
Right.
call in the alternate.
But is this the same matter because they went to the ZBA first for a variance, I believe?
That's a variance. This is. a
This has
land
nothing to do
special land.
with regarding a variance. You see, so there's a distinction. I don't know if you want to be on the safe side or not.
I think you err on being conservative and say what Bob's doing is he's sitting out.
Yeah, the family that was here when they were building out on the bluff, he did not vote on that one because he voted on it at the ZBA. So
Okay.
we have a history of taking that route.
Okay, so let the record show that
I
this is,
would so request. Should they-
so let the record show that this has been tabled
correct.
till the next meeting.
And we'll
Sorry
have,
about that.
We'll have to wrangle up the planning commission, all the members to make sure we can confirm, especially special land use, if they're gonna be here or not. That's gonna be
Check on
important.
it, yeah.
So that way they don't come to the meeting.
Thank you all very much.
We're sorry.
We'll see, that's all right, we'll see you the next
But
round.
you gotta send Nancy back in though, because we need it for the next.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you,
guys.
Mark.
Yep, ciao.
Bob, you're allowed back up. Thanks for coming anyway.
I know. You guys sat down.
Oh, my gosh.
He's probably watching
I just wanna know
basketball with
if you go over there,
jammies.
scrape all the dry crowd off.
I know.
Sorry. Jeff will do it.
So we can close the public hearing on that.
Yeah, can someone make a motion to close the public hearing?
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second,
that.
second.
Are you guys done? You're not gonna talk about it tonight.
No.
Right, we're sorry.
No, hey.
Yeah, all in favor of closing the public hearing?
I,
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nancy. Okay,
There's another
move on to
one.
short-term rentals. Since we're talking about this, I have a short-term rental. I bring this up at every meeting when this is discussed. It's in the B1 district. It's not part of where it could be limited or anything like that, but there's a small possibility I would benefit from that. So in the past, we have allowed me to be part of the conversation by do not vote. Is that still acceptable to everyone?
yes, yes.
Okay. All right, so to start this off, the goal here is to discuss what was written, this final copy here that was created by Jim Raymer. And we'd like to review it, get information on it, comments, and see if we are comfortable enough with it that we can schedule a public hearing for next month. Because that'll be the next step. If we think we're really close on this thing, that we have a conversation, with the public about it in the future.
Sorry, so John asked if this needed to go to the planning commission. It's because Jim Raymer had advised that because we're gonna be potentially distinguishing between zoning districts and the city code, that it's.
So he's recommending a public hearing?
Yeah,
He's recommending that because even though this is in the city code and is really under city council's purview, we're making references to zoning districts. And I believe we're adding some definitions into the zoning code that will reference, that we would have a public hearing for this, that we would, if we like this language, we would schedule that for the April meeting. Obviously, and if there's some changes to this, we can obviously make some minor changes and still have that public hearing.
So we have red lines, this is sort of like a red line session, if you will, where we can make notes on this, or just like say, yeah, this is great, just the way it is, or add notes, and then I guess at that point, we'll decide if it's minor enough, we can still have a scheduled meeting for next month for a public hearing on this. Do you want to introduce this at all, or just open it up to some comment and then we'll start our discussion?
Let's do some comment.
Okay. The public, we always let you go first. Anybody would like to comment on what would be the recommended short-term rental licenses, rules and regulations for the city of Harbor Springs? Here, oh, there you go.
I'm Linda Rockwitz, 519 East Third Street, and I have not read so if I'm talking about something that's in there or not in there, I'm sorry. And my understanding is that the cap is on 61 short-term rentals in R1, and there's some other.
AR.
AR, okay. I would ask and hope that number be reduced by attrition. I think the plan that was talked about the last time is outstanding, the waiting list and all of that. And I have no data, I have no factual information as to what the number in residential, the correct number is. Who knows? I mean, my preference would be 0, but I understand you and I commend you all for giving this 2 years at least mean, I started attending meetings at least 2 summers ago on this. So you have listened to everyone, you've looked at all sides. And I guess the only thing I have to add is if we're going to do a new ordinance, if we're going to make this, part of what's the law, let's take this opportunity to reduce the number while we're getting used to what we do with short-term rentals. I mean, as you said, Mark, at a couple meetings ago, the internet changed everything. I mean, people in Harbor Springs have rented their homes for years and years and years. And, but now it's become so lucrative, and you can, people from all over the world can rent a house in Harbor Springs with a click of the, of the button on the computer. So I feel that the fewer, the better. In that, in our last eastern 2 blocks of East 3rd Street, we have 4 out of, I believe it's 11 homes. I would really hate to see another one, and yet we are ripe for, we are close to the beach, close to, downtown. It would be a very desirable place. We lost a neighbor a few weeks ago. That house will probably come on the market. I would hate to see that be a short-term rental, even though I have not had any personal problems with renters, it's just what it does to the neighborhood. We've worked very hard in our neighborhood to become a neighborhood. We have block parties, and we know each other's kids and each other's pets, and when you bring in strangers every weekend or every other week, that changes that quality. There's just, and I know that by instinct, not by any facts that I have. I will just share, I know you've heard it all, but you may have missed this one. One of the houses, a house 2 doors west of us was in the rental program for years. A young woman with 2 small children rented it for the summer. I believe she was supposed to stay. I looked out my window and saw a man standing behind a tree on my empty lot next door. I thought, well, that's pretty weird. And then I saw the lady and her 2 little kids go down, and he chased after them. And I thought, well, that's even weirder. But I thought, well, maybe they're playing some kind of game. Maybe he's playing hide and seek with kids. I did not, I didn't give it much thought. A few days later, somebody was in our neighbors across the street's home. They went in, cooked, used the bathroom, made themselves at home for a little while because they could look right out there, and we surmised it was the estranged husband. We learned later that he was stalking her. And so he went into the house, and I don't even think he broke it. I don't know, Kyle, if you were here, if you remember, he probably knew where the key was, watched enough to know how to get in, or found it. And that was just creepy. That was that, and that kind of thing can happen, and it changes the neighborhood. That's just all there is to it. So I would ask that you sunset the number to 50. Somebody had the last meeting, somebody had some kind of data, some research that said more than 50% or more than 5%. And I don't have the details of that, Rick, but that just sounds better to me. Plus it gives us time. And I know you all want what's best for the community, and you're hearing from, one group, and I don't want you to take my position. Just ask yourself in your heart, what's best for this community? Who's gonna serve on these commissions? And thank you all. I know you've put in a lot of hours on this. And who's gonna run for city council? Not short-term renters. So just please consider adding a clause that would reduce the number. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there I couldn't find it, just looking for it, but it states in here that essentially we can change the rules as things go forward. Is that stated in here in some fashion? I just glanced through it, I saw it, I was trying to,
But you
to
can
address
change the
your point.
ordinance.
In
Is that what
looking
you
at
mean, to
this.
change the ordinance?
Yeah,
Yeah, rules may be amended.
maybe that's what it was. And so even though we may not have this 100% right, you know, that's built into that we can change this in the future. We may be able to amend this as we get more information and as we move forward. Right now, I think we got it pretty close because right now, nobody's really happy. Actually, you've expressed the most positive of anybody because you get both sides that nobody's happy. That means
Right.
it's probably a good decision. I mean, sort of found that middle spot.
Yeah.
And so I think we're sort of there, but there is the ability to change this in the future, either more or less
Right.
as we go forward. And right now, we put a lot of work into the wait list. And so as long as the wait list has people in it, you know, it will stay at that number.
At 61.
Right. So the wait list would have to be exhausted for it to be reduced. Is that correct, Jeff?
So we've got this separated, it looks like, into two documents.
Yeah.
There's ordinance number 437.
Yeah.
Which is really about 2 pages. It's a bit shorter. But I believe that it makes a reference to rules and regulations. And so we have a second document here that's a number of pages longer, where it provides those rules and regulations. We have our definitions for short-term rental local agent. We're adding a couple new ones here, a normal person.
Natural.
You know, or natural person, normal. Is that-
What is normal? Yeah.
we also define a licensee, right? So, and one of the reasons there was we had a lot of discussions about companies, corporations, right? So we've defined a licensee is a natural person. And that, you know, so when we issue a short-term rental license, it has to be to a person, and that person has to have a percentage interest in that property. We also have then some other, you know, things in here. But yes, when we go to page 4 of that is when we're talking about the wait list that we created, right? That basically there's the option for people as long as they've met all the requirements and there haven't been any, you know, issues with, you know, things that they can renew their license for the next year. And then when there aren't any licenses available, if there are people that are still looking, that they would be added to the wait list. And there's some language here that I'll have to read a couple more times before I fully understand what Jim Raymer has done here. But the idea is to, you know, keep it at a set number, but then, you know, create this wait list for other people that as short-term rental property owners come off the, you know, are no longer on, then the new people would come on and take over. I think there's certainly, if it's the wish of the planning commission to add language, that they would like to see that number be raised or lowered. We could certainly incorporate something to, as current short-term rental property owners don't renew, that number could trend down to a lower number. Or we could keep it the same, or we could say we'd like to see more and we would add 1 or 2 new ones each year until we hit whatever new higher number that is. So there's the ability, and I think if you think that 61 is fine, we can leave that as it is. If you think another number is more appropriate, we can go back and add some language that would trend in that direction.
Okay. We're gonna check online before I forget. Anybody online want to make a comment here?
Please raise your hand if you would like to, your Zoom hand.
Your Zoom.
I don't see anyone raising their hand.
Okay. Well, Mark, let's start having a discussion.
Yeah, Mark, in answer to your question on the last page of the ordinance, under D, general provisions, number 2, the amendments are, these rules may be amended, repealed, or extended without notice at the discretion of the city, so that's there.
Yeah.
But can I just go over that really quickly? Just really quick to add that. So we have very similar rules and for our harbor commission for moorings and docks. And so
Right.
the second part is not an ordinance. So these rules would not need to go through any sort of public hearing. These rules can be amended by the city council at any time. Whereas an ordinance, for example, once you adopt an ordinance, I think there's like a year-long provision before you can like re-adopt a different or edit that ordinance. So yeah, I just want to clarify. So the rules can be changed at any time. But the ordinance would have to go through a hearing. public
And where
hearing
is the
process.
61 limit?
That's in the
That's in the
ordinance.
rules.
That's in the ordinance as well.
It's
Is
in
it
the
in there?
ordinance too, though.
It's in
Oh,
both. It's
yeah,
in both.
that's what I thought. So, because I think there is a time frame where you can't change an ordinance for a
Yeah.
certain amount.
Yeah, one
Once
year, you
adopted.
can't touch the ordinance for
Yeah,
one
Per
year.
year. So just as a clarification between.
Which is.
So anyway, so Rick, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that so people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and the second point I want to make is that some past meeting, I did bring up the attrition factor. And since that time, there've been letters from people that would like to see the number come down. And I just would like to suggest that we do put that in, that once we've exhausted the waiting list and a license doesn't get renewed and there's not a waiting list, that the following year we drop that one license off and slowly decrease it till we get to a number that we like. 5% usually is a number that many communities use. But just, we don't have to say how low it's gonna go, just have the attrition factor in there so that when we exhaust the waiting list and a license doesn't get renewed, instead of letting it sit there vacant, we just reduce the number from 61 to 60. And if it happens again the next year, then down to 59, because things that I'm reading are saying that this is basically a fad and it's gonna start dying out real soon. So let's be ready for it and work into it and take advantage of it when it happens.
I have a question, Rick. Will you say when the waiting list gets exhausted, but this waiting list is an ongoing thing that gets added to?
Yes, but if there's nobody on it,
So then it'll take care of itself. I mean, I don't know if we can write that. I'm trying to picture how you would write that in an ordinance.
once,
Well, I think what Rick is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, here is, let's say right now we're at 61.
Yeah.
And then there's no one on the waiting list, year 5. And so then it's down to, there's only 60 people renting, so that new high is now at 60. So then there might, if someone else comes on the waiting list, it doesn't go out to 61, it's at 60. I don't know am I saying that right, Rick?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
So while I get where you say it takes care of itself
Yeah, I
initially, but let's say year 10, someone comes back on there's a waiting list, but now that waiting list is for the 60th spot and not the 61st spot, because there's no longer 61 spots. That's what Rick's going.
I think we're complicating our life.
Well,
I mean, that's
maybe
my,
I'm just
if
explaining.
the ordinance is at 61 and we can't touch it for a year, that's fine, because that waiting list isn't gonna go away in a year. Yes, John, I'm calling you.
One of the things that when you craft an ordinance, you want to make sure that a couple of years from now, if you want to change it, you don't have to necessarily go back through the entire adoption process. So like on ordinance 437, the 2-pager, which, is the police power. My recommendation is under section 2, where the word or the number 61 shows up, would be that we would not have 61 in there. We would just say, shall not exceed the number specified in the rules. Okay, so you don't have to go back later on and change the order.
Ordinance, that's a good idea.
You could just change the
Rules. And then under
That was a really good
the rules section, where it says on page 3, number 3, issuance of short-term licenses. I would insert a new B that basically states that the current number of licenses shall be 61. And then wherever 61 is listed in the other parts of the rules, instead of saying 61, is the number specified in section 3, subsection
We
B.
only have to change one thing.
Only
when
change
you
it once on the rules, so you can, as the council, if they want to go through an attrition program, they would just change the rules from 61 to 60, and then everything is recalibrated without having to go through the adoption
Yeah.
process.
Makes a lot more sense.
And my side note is, I love it when I can find to make a change in an ordinance that's written by an attorney. And if Kevin's here, I would say the same thing. Because they,
Well, I think that's a
That makes perfect sense.
very insightful.
Question for Jeff, real quick. Jeff, what's the number of residences that we're working with now? Total, how many residences are we saying there are?
So the
In the
total
city.
number of residential properties or residences within the city is between 1,150 to 1,200 throughout the city of Harbor Springs.
So it's 61, we're at 5%. We're at 4.9%.
The 61 is just in the R1.
Yes.
So that's about 1,000,
Well,
right?
but we have residential properties within the central business district as well.
So
And so when you look at so we have short-term rental licenses in single-family districts is 61. That where we're talking about setting the limit at 61.
Okay.
But we have approximately 30 to 35 more short-term rental licenses within business districts like the CBD. So when you look at our total number of properties licensed, we're at about 95, let's say. So if we then math that and say, what is it, 95 divided by, let's say 1,200, because we have some commercial properties downtown. So we're really at about 8% for the number of short-term rentals that we have in Harbor Springs.
And so of the 1,000 homes in the R1, R2, the 61% is about 6%, right?
yeah.
In the residential.
So it can trend downward, but we can change that in the.
But it
Per
could
what John's
change,
saying.
because all we're really talking about is the R1 and
R1.
AR. We don't have a cap on anything else.
Hey, Jeff, what does the wait list look like now?
We really haven't started a wait list.
Okay.
But I will say we had, when we reached our 61, we probably had another 5 or 6 applications of people that we had to say no to. So I would say theoretically, we have a wait list, or if we start one, it would have at least that many people on it. Realistically, what we would do, once we set that up, we would create a small document that we would send out to people that want to be put on the wait list, similar to what they do with Mike Johnson with our harbor master does for moorings of boat slips or kayaks. So anybody that's familiar with that process, we would probably set up a process that mirrors that very closely. Some people like it, some people don't. It is what it is, but it works very well. And it's been in existence in Harbor Springs for a number of years. And I don't know whether, I think the kayak wait list moves more quickly than, for instance, the boat slip ones. So it'd be difficult to say how quickly people's applications would process through before they would have a short-term rental. I don't know if that would be,
Depends how popular short-term rental is.
depends on how quickly the changeover is on them. It might take a long time, it might be very quick.
I have a couple of questions, and I read this a while ago. They might be answered. For the wait list, if you number one, how do you contact them? Do we have a pretty tight way that we reach out to them so we don't get ourselves into a problem?
So currently for our moorings and
Right.
and slips, we do. I mean, for those that do have a mooring or slip or kayak, we have email, phones, and we give them a certain amount of days.
I was gonna say, as long as we specify, we're gonna try 3 times or whatever.
I think there's a certain, if I recall, a certain number of days they have to respond
Okay.
to our message. or
And then
our
if they
request.
decide they're not ready to take it, they just completely come off the wait
They lose
list,
it,
right? They don't stay at the top and get asked next time, right? They can join the wait list again,
Yes,
but they would go to the bottom of the list.
that's the way it works for the slips and moorings. Yeah.
And for the companies, I'm sorry, I don't have this right in front of me, where it has to be someone who owns a certain amount, if it's an LLC. What happens if you've got 2 people that are 50% owners and one of them sells out? But the license stays with that property. I'm trying to be a devil's advocate here. Just, what happens to that license? And if, say, John Doe pulled the license and John Doe and John Smith own the property, John Doe sells his half, John Smith still wants it and he owns 50% of the property, it's the same property that has the license, what happens to that license?
My feeling and based on my review of this at this point is that, like, you and I as an example, you and I own property as an LLC,
Right.
50% interest each.
Yeah.
We would work with the licensee to issue a license. So if I'm the applicant and the licensee, I'm the one getting that short-term rental license for the property,
Yeah.
even though it's in an LLC that you and I own. If you sell your interest and Victor buys that, I'm still the one that's licensing that property for short-term
But
rental.
what if the opposite happens?
If he
If
sells.
I sell,
Yeah.
then I think that we have a new applicant and they would not be treated as continuing that old one.
I just think we have to be really careful of that.
Well, sure,
Um,
Nancy, just think about a divorce.
Yeah, I can
Well,
see lots of different things.
We
that
do have
happen.
language in here that does talk about divorces, that if there's a transfer from a spouse, that they would be able to keep it.
Right,
Yes.
okay. I just think with we need to be really, really specific.
And that's very similar to our rules, or similar to our rules for the moorings. and-
But what does that mean? This exception shall not apply in a successor marriage of the such a sign, what?
I was confused by that.
Yeah, that one's
There's a lot of interesting.
there's a
things
lot
that
of
can happen with-
legalese in that one. What does that mean?
Without knowing exactly what you were
What
looking
section
at
are you
there. Yeah, what section?
It's number 5.
Page.
It's in the
1, 2, 3, 4,
rules,
yeah,
right?
Page 5 in the rules, last page of the rules.
A licensee is prohibited from assigning his or her short-term license to any person provided that a license may be assigned to the spouse of the licensee. This exception shall not apply in the successor marriage.
So what that means is that, let's say,
After the death.
that person remarries and then that spouse dies or they get divorced. That would apply.
You and I are married, Vanessa, and I have a short-term rental.
Okay,
And through our divorce, I give it to you,
okay,
and then you remarry
yeah,
Mark.
yeah.
You can't give your interest to him then and have him continue it on. People can't
Sorry,
be
Mark.
getting married just to bypass.
Yeah, you can't.
What about children that inherit a home?
Yeah,
Sorry to be picky, but I can just foresee all sorts of.
At this point in time, we do not have anything in the no assignment that would allow a short-term rental property owner to pass on their short-term rental license to a child. If we think that we feel that we want to add that, we could,
It just was a
That-
question.
yeah.
It's because the sentence there says, except for a transfer to the spouse as provided above, the license is revoked upon the death of license. holder.
Okay, so it wouldn't. if-
but it
Something-
doesn't pass.
Something to keep in mind is the more exceptions that you
Oh, I know.
enter into, the longer you're
I know.
allowing that short-term
That's
rental
your.
to continue.
So that,
Whether
I'm
you
fine.
like that idea or not,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the other thing too that I noticed, and Jeff and I talked about this, one of our short-term rental folks this year that just got a license, then put that house on the market and for sale by owner. And I asked Jeff, okay, so what happens if that house sells tomorrow? And she's got the house rented all summer with people, what happens with that?
He's got a problem.
And, yeah, so I just, and the way it's written, that license goes away
Correct.
because it's a different owner. I don't have a problem with it, but I think we need to be aware. I also think we really need to think hard about how much of this we can enforce.
Yeah.
You know, how much of it really are we gonna be able to enforce with all these rules that we're putting in place?
So if you ask Mike Johnson, he enforces it pretty well at the marina.
But that's,
It's a little, this
that's,
is much larger.
the boats are sitting right in front of him every day and he knows which boat is which.
I think the
I
big
just
picture
different,
issues of whether or not they have a license and whether or not they can operate as a short-term rental, I think that, you know, we can enforce that. I mean, any enforcement is gonna require that we end up in court if we have to go that far, but that can be enforced. I think some of the smaller details, I think, are the things that we're finding are more difficult to enforce. One thing that I think is becoming an issue that's difficult to work with is trying to enforce the occupancy. We created the limitation of the 2 people per bedroom.
Yeah.
And that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Working with that. So if we want to look at whether we want to continue to try and regulate that, that's taking a lot of time.
Yeah, oh, I know, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah, I just think we have to be cautious of the number. Some of these are easy. The house sells, you can tell that the house is, I mean, you have access to all that. But I do think just, we need to be a little cautious how many rules we're trying to enforce. Because we're struggling with the ones we have not. We're not enforcing the ones we have now. I mean, we're trying, but it's
It's a process. Yeah, it's not quick.
It's an ongoing process, unending process. So those were just my questions from reading the ordinance.
John, do you have any comments on this transfer issue? What you've seen and experienced?
No, I think the way Jim's got it set up, the way that we talked to Jim about it was, we tried to make it kind of foolproof in a way that people can't transfer their interest to other people or trusts or estates, that it's got to be with the person, and if the person sells the property, the license does not go with the property. So I think he's done a pretty good job of really trying to contain this.
And this is consistent with what happens in Marina that Mike enforces, because if you buy a boat that has a mooring, doesn't mean you get the mooring.
Right.
Essentially, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing. I like it that it's consistent.
And I've talked to him about the process of actually, going through this. They have a date, that you have to renew. If you want to keep your boat slip, they give you until this date to contact them. When that date hits, they call you. Hey, you haven't been in touch with us. What's going on? And then they get that confirmation of, yep, nope, I'm done. I'm not going to continue my boat slip. That's when they then would go to the first person on the wait list and say, we have a slip available. And so we can mirror that process.
I don't think we should call and remind them on the phone. I think if we send emails a month ahead and they all have the rules, because then if you try and call them and you don't get hold of them and they say, well, you didn't call me, and you said you were going to call me and remind me, I think we have to be really careful.
I just want to make sure that there's at least one attempt somehow that's consistent to make sure, like, when they send out that initial letter of, you have until this date to reply. I'd like to do our best, with what we can to minimize and avoid the situation we had this year where we had a couple of people that mailed in applications and we didn't get
Have you
them.
looked into online, just collecting funds?
We don't have that capability yet. If we get that ability, that would be great. Yeah, and not that I want to get in touch with calling everybody, but at least one follow-up attempt of, we didn't get anything from you. Did you mean to send us something to at least provide a reminder?
Couldn't the computer system be programmed to spit out a
Yeah.
postcard
Or an email.
to
their
60
email.
people?
It
Spits out.
We
with
do have
the
a-
software we have right now.
We do have an email list or.
I think if you send an email reminder 5 days before whatever the drop dead date is, whatever you choose, I think that's fine. But when it doesn't show up on time, to say that you're gonna contact them and say, why didn't you renew your license on? I don't think that's a good thing to do. I think we're opening a door there that we don't want to open.
It doesn't get in, it doesn't get in.
It-
I don't get a call from the state of Michigan if I don't renew my,
They don't call me and
My
remind me
cat's
about
in my car.
about my nursing license. I mean, they don't, they don't.
Yeah.
And plus you're gonna send.
Don't tell you
me-
where you're at with your continuing education.
No.
You gotta
And I
take
think
care
a
of your own.
letter, a month before to say, if you're renewing your license, here's what you need to do, here's the date, this is when it's due. I think that's fine.
You better look into that, Mark.
But
You got your
not
numbers
having
yet?
to do that. I don't think that.
Theoretically,
And I
all
think-
the applicants should have a copy of the rules. If the copy of the rules has the deadline, if
Right.
the deadline doesn't change from year to year.
Right.
It's always December 1st.
Yep.
They should know that.
Yeah.
But I'll say just a caveat to that. I mean, our approach at City Hall is for a long time has always been little lenient and compliance. That's kind of how our approach is. It's a small community. That's how our approach has been. Everyone knows everyone. So we kind of been a little, and that's how a lot of small communities are. Maybe it doesn't make it right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the tradition has kind of been here. It's like we've been, hey, we're your friendly neighbor, city manager, zoning administrator, gonna give you a call to let you know you're late. And sometimes when we don't do that, you see, the kind of pushback we get because you didn't do that. You didn't follow up with us. Now we're at fault for that, so.
Yeah, I just think you need, and we're not dealing with a tiny little community anymore. I mean, when we're dealing in the short-term rental, we're dealing with people from all over the world. And I mean, you know, and we all sat there and dealt with all that last month. I just, the date's there and, you know, I mean, it's like planning commission, if you don't get it in on time, then you have to wait till the next month. And sometimes you have to anyway, because of what happened tonight. It's what happens. And I think we're fair. I think we're so fair at reaching out with people and trying to help them understand when the due dates are. But I think it's fair if they don't get it in. I really do.
Well, and Jim, and I see that he's even bolded it.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
language
sounds
in
good.
here
Good,
you know,
about the mail. Yeah.
regarding the
Yeah.
delivery
Yeah.
of, you know, it must be received and here are the forms of delivery. And then it even specifies the risk of non-delivery by the US mail shall be
know it
borne by
does
the
that.
licensed.
And I
So
think
he's
that's
well
good.
spelled this
Yeah, I
out.
think
Yeah.
it would be very helpful if there would be some way that someone could pay, like by credit card, or, I mean, that, if we can figure that out so you don't have to deal with sending a check in the US mail, that would be great. I think if we could come up with a way to make that.
And we're certainly working
I know.
on not just the payment of things like that, but other.
But
other
everything, no, I
functions.
know, and I think that's. that-
Victor, don't stop being a kinder,
No,
gentle.
definitely not, that's, yeah.
We like it.
So are we close enough with this that we think, you know, per changing the, you know, the number to the rules section? Is there anything else on here that we think, are we pretty close that we can go forward with a public meeting on this?
I'd like to.
Yeah,
I think
I
John's-
feel like
John's comments
we're
are-
really
John?
close. You know,
Take a
is
look
it
at your
perfect?
comments.
No,
Yeah, send it to
but I
Jim.
think it's pretty darn good. Okay.
It would be nice to be able to put it on a back burner for a while.
Yeah, one time.
Really
Get some
good.
stuff done.
I've got some nitpicks here for you.
Okay,
Ordinance number 437, section 2, part 1. In the third line, it says who has failed to pay all, and it's fined here. I think that should probably be fines.
yep,
And then on the short-term rental license is on page 1. Definitions, number 1. I think we're missing a phrase there.
So at the end, yeah, the end of it.
Oh, such as?
Yeah, it says such as, and then there's nothing there.
Oh, so group homes such as just needs to be removed because the period, right?
I don't know if there's supposed to be something else there or.
right, it does just kind of end, doesn't it?
We either need a period or something.
It's up to your imagination.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, we'll get that,
And on page 3 of that document,
mhm.
fifth line down, you've got clerk with 2 periods.
All right,
And on page 4, section 3, we've got a real awkward sentence. The city clerk will send an invoice for the waiting list fee, the then existing. So I think that the doesn't need to be there. That's all for the picky stuff.
okay.
Thanks, Rick.
Yeah, no, those are good catches, yeah.
No, good, that's helpful.
Okay, so do we need a motion to set up for this meeting?
I think we can certainly just reach back out to Jim and have him update this. These are small corrections, but yeah, basically, if you're inclined, we would, a motion to schedule a public hearing for the April Planning Commission meeting
Right.
to discuss
So
this.
moved.
Second,
I'll second that.
and I have to abstain from voting. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let's see. Any other comments from the members? Last item on the agenda. Anything? We're all good? Okay, meeting's over. Thank you all.
Thank you.